It's never been done, actually, in history. So in this way, we're not really authentic at all. But as I believe that real authenticity resides in being authentic to yourself. That's the only way you can be authentic. So we don't really care too much about that. But we discovered that both instruments blend so well. When we first tried those two instruments together, we were just so surprised about the sound. It's like surround sound avant la lettre. It's so complete because the tuning of the instruments is very similar. You have Viennese tuning in D major and the standard tuning, because there are many tunings. But the standard tuning for the viola d'amore is in D major. And both instruments resonate by themselves immensely. The Viennese bass is a very resonating instrument, so is the viola d'amore. But both instruments together, they really sound like you're playing 4 or 5 instruments at the same time. So it's a very, very beautiful sound. Of course, there's no way of knowing if we're doing it right, whatever that means. We will never know. And even with all the treatises we have and with all the research we have, there's no way we're ever going to know whether we're doing it right or not. And even if by accident we did it really right, we wouldn't even know it was right, because there's no reference, there are no recordings, nobody's gone back to listen and who can tell us, you know, you're totally wrong. So we have no idea. We have no idea. We take Sperger's music with the viola, and we arrange a lot of music that we like. So we started with the Viennese music, and then we went to viola d'amore pieces. For instance, Ariosti wrote a number of sonatas for viola d'amore and basso continuo. Basso continuo, well, why not on a Viennese bass? And they really work well, most of them. And from there we took it a lot further, because why stop at the classical period? Why not play contemporary music or play film music or play pop music with these two instruments, and you can really go a long way. And we're now preparing a number of programs for a Japan tour next summer. We have a lot of Japanese music that we arranged for the duo. And Giuseppe Lupis, the American composer, wrote a piece for us. And we're even working on some Kreisler pieces, the violin virtuoso pieces for viola d'amore and bass, and they work amazingly well. So there's a lot more to come, I'm sure. That's one of the most interesting things about the Viennese bass. It's not just the sound color, but everything's connected. You can't change the tuning of a bass without changing the whole fingering system and the bowing system. And that's why a lot of this ancient Viennese music doesn't really work well on a modern instrument. There are different elements. First of all, gut strings and steel strings are two totally different worlds. And you get a kind of resonant bell sound with a gut string almost automatically. You don't really have to do an effort to get this resonant sound where you just attack the string and it resonates by itself. With a steel string you have to put much more effort into, and that's why we get this sustained quality of sound with the modern instrument. So this sound production is very different. Second, most of the Viennese double bass music, especially the music of Sperger's, has very interesting articulations, and his way of notating articulation is very special. And once you get to know his system, there are no mysteries. It's very clear how you have to articulate it. And when you play Viennese tuning for a long time, I've been doing it for, I think, about 30 years. Every day I discover new things and new ways. I say, oh, now I got it. And you really discover new things every day, and you find these connections between the tuning and the fingering and the bowing, and you find things that are so obvious, but which take you a long time to find. And what always strikes me when I see bass players use Viennese tuning for the first time, or people not used to using Viennese tuning, is that they still use modern fingerings and they go up and down on one string instead of playing across the strings like they did back then. Even in the highest thumb positions, you play in the second and the third and even the fourth string in the very high positions. And we learn to do to do all these technical things on one string. We just go to the first string as fast as possible, and then all the melodies we try to have a uniform sound and just play them on one string on the chanterelle, just to have this uniform sound color. And actually it's very interesting to try and find how you can combine the vertical and the horizontal way of playing. And this way of playing in Viennese tuning is very dominant, and it's very interesting. And the articulations become more natural if you play this way. We've come full circle because modern players with modern basses tuned in fourths, they use the old music van Haldittersdorf and they play it in fourths. And actually what we do now is we take the music that was written for a bass in fourths and we play it in Viennese tuning. So we've come full circle now. So I've recently recorded some Bottesini music in Viennese tuning, and we're doing Kreisler in Viennese tuning, and we just take the modern pieces now and we use them in Viennese tuning. It's kind of a revenge, sweet revenge. Ancient music can be a means to distinguish yourself and to stand out. Not all of our motives are very noble. We don't always have noble motives for doing what we do. We have very personal motives, and a personal motive is, for instance, to be special and to do something that nobody does, and to find a niche and to do something that people say, hey, we haven't seen that before. It's a motivation as well, and you shouldn't deny it. And you shouldn't be ashamed of that, because it can be a tremendous energy to realize you're doing something not many people are doing. It's a good motivation. The fact that the International Society of Bassists at this convention has this ancient music division is a good sign. There's a lot to be discovered. And the great thing about playing ancient music and about being busy with these old music and old instruments and gut strings and all that is that actually it makes you a better player in mainstream music. It makes such a difference in your technique, in your openness, in your perception of knowing where it all comes from. Now when I play Wagner or Mahler, I know where it comes from. I hopped back to ancient times and I've come in this direction to modern music, whereas usually what we do is we start from today and we go backwards from there with all our contemporary ideas and romantic ideas, and with this approach we go to ancient music. No, the idea is just to make this skip and just hop back 500 years or more and then try and approach it from that side and see how music changes in the timeline from early days to today. I think that's a more interesting approach. Here I have a couple of violones here. This is a violone, a 5-string violone, and I have a 7-string violone, which, by the way, I had made especially because 7-string violones don't exist in history, as far as we know. So that's a mix between a D and a G violone in one instrument. But the violone, as I use it with the bass gamba tuning on D, so it's a D, G, C, E, A, and on the 7th string I have another D and a G as well on top. But this tuning is really interesting for Baroque music and even Viennese classical orchestra music, because I don't really believe that during the Viennese classical period all bass players used Viennese tuning for everything. I don't think so. I don't believe, I can't prove it, but neither can people prove the idea that everybody did use Viennese tuning. So there's no proof either way. But I don't think so, because very often Viennese tuning, as I said, is very good in D major and in the neighboring tonalities. But As soon as you go far away from D major, it doesn't really work. It makes it very, very awkward. And the violone tuning works really well in almost all tonalities. And I use it for, I'm going to use it now in the opera, in a mainstream setting where we play Mozart with modern instruments, but I'm using a 5-string orchestral bass with the violone tuning. And I've played the Mozart symphonies, the last 3 symphonies, with a violone tuning. And suddenly all of the difficult bits that we have to study for years, suddenly everything falls into place and everything becomes easy. So that's one more reason why it's interesting to go back to ancient music to see what people did back then, or what are the possibilities. And once you know these tunings, you can make life really easy for yourself. You just take the tuning that best suits the piece you're going to play, instead of slaving away at some excerpts that are almost unplayable, and suddenly it just works with a different tuning. So actually,
self-discovery.
Yes, actually it's laziness. I don't like to work for hours on something that you know it's never going to be really, really good anyway. So I'd rather work on learning a new tuning, knowing that eventually I'll be able to play it really well in this tuning. So it's a different approach. It's a kind of laziness, I have to say, I admit.